All right, everybody. So, before we get started today, a couple of announcements. There is at a back table, when I get boring, not if, it's a when, everybody. When I get boring, that back table has a lot of McMurray University swag back there. Our guest preacher, Ricky Harrison, is with us today, and this is swag left over from annual conferences. So if you're interested in what's going on at McMurray, if you'd like to pick up, I thought this was a sticker. He says everybody thinks it's a sticker, but it's a really cool, just a little handout about you can use it as a fan, not in here. Oh my gosh. Boy. We are apparently, Central United Methodist Church is for influenza or pneumonia. New Mexico, where did that come from? Okay, never mind. Okay, then I put a whole bunch of stuff in the center of your tables. So at the center of your tables is last week's slide presentation and the big schism sheet. You also have one of these with a question card at the bottom for that. And then I picked up a couple of, for those of you who are nerdy like me, nobody's like me? Claudia, it's Bert. I'm glad we're not recording. Oh, we are recording. Oh boy, okay. Oh, it's positive. No one's like me. I'll take it as positive. We're going to talk later. So I only put one copy of this on each of the tables, but just 2 weeks ago, there was a new fragment of the Gospel of Thomas found. It's dated back to the 5th century. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the Bible and the fragments that are there in building out those fragments. This is a really cool short article on this, and you can tell my prowess of printing is that it cut off the left side and it's too small. You're welcome. So not only are you going to be reading about a fragment, but you're reading from a fragment. That's how it goes. So, sorry. I don't know. Okay, let's get to questions from last week before we jump in. It is chilly. Okay. Yes, on average, the temperature of the church is nice. 100 degrees in the hallways, 150 degrees on the third floor. 50 degrees in here. On average, it's 78. It's beautiful. Okay, questions from last week. I love this question, and I think it's rhetorical, but I'm going to answer it. Is it possible that our purpose, our mission, whatever it is as simple as living the red words of Jesus? So simple that we have to complicate them? Wouldn't that be a thing if we actually lived out the red words? I love that question, and I'm taking it to heart for the week. What if we just lived out the red words of Jesus? You are healed. Pick up your mat and go home. Come out. Unbound yourself. All of those things. Imagine that. Imagine those were our declarations to the world, our neighbors, our family, maybe even looking at ourselves. This is for me, everybody. Y'all are probably way healthier than I am. Looking at myself in the mirror and saying, unbound yourself. Free yourself from shame and fear and anger and embrace the love of God that's already within you. That may be just for me. Okay. All right, so here's something. I'm paying $5 to this person. A history of Central UMC would be so helpful as it fits into the global context. Absolutely, I completely agree. This church was founded before New Mexico was a state. I think that spirit of being a church on the frontier, even before things were organized, gives us a kind of freedom, a freedom to connect in a new way. I totally agree. This is too much for this series, but maybe a separate series. That'd be really fun. And then this person who wrote this down, wouldn't it be fun to have a Phyllis Tickle series? Where we take, last week I talked about Phyllis Tickle's book, The Great Emergence. She mentions, which I think is totally true, every 500 years, the church goes through a reformation, a transformation. And in that 500 years, there's something that gets agitated. So, there are 500 years after the death of Jesus, you have the creeds. Then 500 years after the creeds, you have the Eastern and Western church splitting, 1066-ish. Then you have 500 years after that, you've got the Great Reformation. Then 500 years after that, you have us. So yesterday we had a really beautiful celebration of life for Jerry Sperlin. And we had people, members from First Denton were here. I was their kids' youth minister, and they sat down in the sanctuary, and Stoker, I thought we got rid of him. What happened? Come all the way out to New Mexico, he's found us. What's going on here? But Jerry Sperlin was this gentleman, Charlie Parker's mentor for the last 30 years. So anyway, it's a small world. And so they said, well, what's been most exciting about your ministry at Central United Methodist Church? I said, there's a kind of freedom in it. I can't really, for those of you who are from the North Texas area, Ricky and Abigail may be able to share in this. It seems so institutional and boxed in. So many things in North Texas are time-bound. And you have to follow rules and all of that kind of thing. Not that we're anarchists here in New Mexico, but here we're all holding loosely to the outcome. It feels like in New Mexico that there is an invitation to be more free. There's an invitation to sit and wonder and wander about and see what's actually going on. Instead of, Stoker, you've got to fit in this box. When you fit in this box, this is how you're going to have a great career if you just do all the right things at the right time in the right way. And that is not the case in New Mexico. Reverend Scott and I had an enjoyable dinner last Sunday night where we were sharing all the ways we said on our way out to our cars, we were talking about, we remember the times in which the boundaries were crossed and the rules were broken, not just by us, but by lay people. So stories of our pastoral ministry, we remember these wonderful spaces and places where people invited us to actually listen more deeply to the Spirit. And that's what I'm finding in New Mexico. That's what I'm most excited about here. Okay, also, sweet treats are there. We have some leftover sweet treats from last week's Pride event, Skittles and fruit things. God's love is fully inclusive. We partnered with Mesa View last week, and so it's just a fun. I thought we had leftovers. You share, and there's more up here. Take them to your neighbors. Okay. All right. The choir call is at 10:15. Okay? 10, am I right? Men go at 10:30, women go at 10:15. Okay, great. All right. I'm not repeating that, George. By the way, George Meineke said there were 2 people in here last week that cheered for Martin Luther, and he was very disappointed that we didn't cheer more loudly for John and Charles Wesley. So I think we need to take that. Okay, thank you. Let's do it now. Thank you, Larry. I didn't know. Why are we so competitive between denominations inside? And you're here, George. You're not a Lutheran church. Okay. So let's begin where we always begin. With me, remember, this is kind of my pastoral mantra. This is what I imagine, how I want to lead this congregation, and I want you to join with me in this. This comes from Miroslav Volf's Exclusion and Embrace. Theologians should concentrate less on social arrangements and more on fostering the kind of social agents capable of envisioning and creating just, truthful, and peaceful societies, and on shaping a cultural climate in which such agents will thrive. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator, and he believed that the Western form of education was, he wanted to defy the Western form of education. So oftentimes, the Western form of education is, here's what you do, reflect on what you do, then have a conversation about what you've done, and then you find your team. You find how you're going to move together collectively. So you get the information, and then you find your people. He wanted to flip the script. What he talked about is we ought to be in solidarity first. We ought to find whoever's going to show up, this is us. And then we need to be in dialogue. So he's already backing it up, right? So flipping the script. Here we are. We need to be in dialogue with one another so we know what our contexts are and where we've come from. And then we need to take a step back and reflect on it. And then we come back together and then we do something. Solidarity, dialogue, reflection, and praxis is what he said. This is the kind of cultural work that is needed, I believe, not just at Central United Methodist Church, but for all churches. This is the kind of cultural work that will shape us for generations to come. Somebody asked me yesterday, it was our conference chancellor was also at our, sorry, it's chilly. No, somebody wrote a question last week about I don't have to wear a suit until the air conditioning's restored. I took it to heart, and now I need it. So our chancellor asked yesterday, what is it about your role here at Central United Methodist Church? What do you imagine for your next steps in ministry? So that's an interesting question. I said, according to Miroslav Volf, everything I do is preparing the person that follows me so that they can walk in the door and be exactly who they are in their pastoral ministry and help that person thrive. I do not want that person to start at my floor. I want them to start at my ceiling. Well, what is that then? Then I've got to create a cultural environment whereby people are finding new ways of being called to ministry and being shaped by their own discipleship. So it matters not what a pastor comes in to do. By the way, for those of you who are still back on what I just said, the person that follows me, I hope that's many years from now. I'm not going anywhere. Okay, all right, okay. Okay, you all, many of you all were still there. Do I need to repeat the thing I said after that? Okay, floor and ceiling. So I've got to create a cultural environment that everybody here can see their own gifts and can see that they're part of something bigger than they are, just as they are. Friends, we have a very, very diverse congregation. We've got neurodiversity in here. We've got age diversity in here. We've got a variety of ways that we can see one another. These are assets. These aren't deficits. This is who we are. So a pastor should come in, and a pastor should say, whoa, this place is on the move. Let's go. Let's listen deeply in how the Spirit's calling us, and it should just be fine-tuning, not collective change, right? All that does is upset the system. It's just fine-tuning. Okay, I'll stop the preaching there. So, let's go to this. Vincent van Gogh was a preacher's kid. explains a lot, George. Oh, wow. Wow. Vincent, I won't tell my kids. I think it was your eyes. That's the funny. That explains a lot. That's funny. Okay. So Vincent van Gogh, everybody knows this piece of artwork? A Starry Night. So let's have some group participation. What do you see? Swirls. The village. Beauty. The church steeple right in the center. Light. Moonlight. Oh, movement, excuse me. Movement. That might be a dead tree or a bush or something. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Friends, this is why Dodie Hawkins is the chair of our green team. She recognizes dead things in photographs. That's right, that's dead. That's dead. Let's get it out of there. It needs water, yeah, but not too much. Anybody see the lights of the houses? How about the light in the church? The lights in the church. Yeah, right under the steeple. The light in the church is dark. In Vincent van Gogh's biography, one author mentions what Vincent van Gogh thought of the church. Vincent van Gogh was neurodivergent. A lot of people have guessed on what his diagnosis was. But sometimes the psychological and social illnesses are intertwined. For Vincent van Gogh, he never felt a part of his Lutheran upbringing. His father was hellfire and damnation. His father chose who was in and who was out. And Vincent never felt like he was in that box. He thought about things differently. He thought about things he was futuristic and began to imagine what the world could be like. Yes, he was a brilliant artist, but it came from something deep within him. A way of seeing the world, and he knew that there was something wrong with the church. That somehow those who were part of the church didn't fully understand him, didn't fully understand that there were people like him who saw the world differently and didn't fit into that one world view. So I'm going to give the end of my talk today at the beginning because we have friends who will be departing. The end is this. It's our job to transform the light in the church so that all of those Vincent van Goghs out there might find light in this place. That's our job, is to turn the light on in every starry night. I'll come back to it. So I want to talk a little bit about, excuse me, how we think about things. So reason. John Wesley believed that the kingdom of God is when the head and heart unite. That is where the kingdom of God is. So often, and I think this is part of my critique that some of you all heard last week, my critique of the decline of the United Methodist Church, as I mentioned, or of the Methodist Church, the Methodist movement, really started in 1868. Some of you all will say, well, wait a second. No, it was the 1970s. D. Andrews, in his book, A History of Methodism, says that says that we can mark the decline of the Methodist movement when we professionalized the clergy class. When we professionalized the clergy class and made it a requirement for there to be more education and more focus on what we think, that's when the decline really started. What I said last week was it disempowered lay people. Now think about the ways that we've increased that professionalization. Now we're requiring every candidate for ministry to have a master's degree. 7.8% of the United States population has a master's degree. 7.8%. Those who have a PhD, it's 0.61% in the United States. Okay, so we're saying that we are so heady and that we require a very, very specialized degree in order for us to, a trained theologian to come in to a local church, and this is going to maybe anger a few folks, sorry, to run a business. Okay, so let me give another word about this. In the United Methodist Church today, there is a sense that we are more, as pastors, Bert, you can help me with this. Ricky, Abigail, you all can help me with this for sure. Am I missing anyone? Okay. That our congregations don't want to hear our theology. If we actually shared theologically every week, people wouldn't come back. So we've got to nuance and shape through personal story and a personal way of being and invite people in to see what the gospel has for their lives. People don't want to do intense word play. In Hebrew, this word means X. And for 300 years, blah, blah, blah. Nobody wants that. As a matter of fact, if we're preaching, if we're leading Bible study, there needs to be an invitation. There needs to be an invitation to how it affects people's personal lives, and so as not to offend those who will go to another church and take their prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness elsewhere. So, I bring this up during a reason talk because this is our growing edge as a United Methodist Church. Our growing edge has been and will be, we will always find people who are more intellectually attuned than emotionally attuned. As a matter of fact, there are congregations out there, I served 2 of them in the North Texas Conference, who were very interested in just giving the heady information, and every time I tried to move them into heart space, it was a week of appointments and emails. Bert is not laughing, just, he's been there. Ricky is smirking, but that's not laughing. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Okay, so I'm bringing up something of our tradition and something that is political. I'm not saying partisan. I'm saying political. Comes from the root word polis, how we a city, how we run a city, how we run a community. This is political theology. Political theology really did come to the fore in 1908 in the Methodist Church. And in the Methodist Church, we had a social creed. This social creed, you can still find it in the back of our hymnal. This social creed was then adopted. Golly, I'm sorry. I am in some. Did everybody else hear that, or is that dog whistle? Okay, thank you. Jacob is my mic guy. Thank you. Oh, that's right. Okay, so the Methodist Episcopal Church stands for equal rights and complete justice for all people in all stations of life. 1908.
What did that mean then?
Yeah, what did it mean then? Yeah. Second, we stand for the principle of conciliation and arbitration in individual dissensions. Industrial dissensions. Yeah, thank you, Donna. Thank you for turning around. I knew you turned around for a reason, to keep me on my toes. Third, for the protection of the worker from dangerous machinery, occupational diseases, injuries, and mortality. We stand for the abolition of child labor. We stand for such regulation of conditions of labor for women as shall safeguard the physical and moral health of the community. And it goes on. We stand for the suppression of the sweating system, sweatshops. For the gradual and reasonable reduction of hours of labor to the lowest practical point with work for all. And for that degree of leisure for all, which is the condition of the highest of human life. For the release from employment 1 day in 7. For a living wage in every industry. For the highest wage that each industry can afford, and for the most equitable division of products of industry that can ultimately be devised. For the recognition of the golden rule and the mind of Christ as the supreme law of society and the sure remedy for all social ills. Okay. 1908. When I read this a few years ago, it sounded like socialism. Right? Workers' rights, days off, so on and so forth, right? I'm not saying communism. I'm not saying totalitarian communism. I'm saying socialism. What's good for all, to the lowest common denominator, etc. So I thought, boy, several years ago, I thought, well, I'll start a workers' rights group at the church I was appointed to. And I used our 1908 social creed. Now, I've done some really strange things in ministry, and I thought I was spot on. Like, this is a tradition of the United Methodist Church to stand with and for workers. It did not go over well.
Texas, right?
I was in Texas, right? It did not go over well. Because a lot of the translation of this has been lost. A lot of the translation of this, although part of our own understanding, in 1908, to Ann's point, what does that translation look like? What does it look like that every industry promote a living wage? And I'm going to say this, what if every industry, including the church, promoted a living wage? I'm not talking about clergy, friends. I'm not talking about the clergy class. I'm not talking about, I didn't bring my tin cup to beg here this morning. I'm talking about our support staff, our custodians. I'm talking about administrative assistants. I'm talking about people who actually are representing and stewarding the property that we all find sacred. That's a different process. Our revised social principles updates this 1908 model and separates out in 6 major categories how we are to live out our understanding of who we are from this intellectual side of things, with reason, with a common understanding of who we are and how we're to live out our calls to ministry, or calls to ministry in our context. So there is the nurturing community. What do we think about families? What do we think about children and childcare? What do we think about healthcare? There's the economic community. How do we understand ourselves as part of the economic cycles of our lived experience together? And how do we, in these economic cycles, know where we fit into the bigger picture? There's the political community, how we work with one another, how we find ways to defy division and defy chasms between us, and find commonality and for the commonwealth and common health of all people. There's the technological community. What do we do with AI? What do we do with ChatGPT other than write my sermon every week? Wait, y'all laughed? You couldn't tell. There was a recipe for brownies that's so weird. In his sermon this week, there's a recipe for brownies. How did that, did Jesus talk about brownies? I got to review that. So technology, what happens with, the medical community. How do we understand advances in medical technology? Advances in how we recognize those living with the diversity of ways of being in the world. And then there's the global community. How do we as United Methodist Christians connect with one another? I bring all this up because I think it's important to know where we are intellectually. Intellectually, as a people, we really want to be ever connected with all of those ways of being. We want to see ourselves as part of something bigger than ourselves. But how did we get here? So I want to talk about economic epochs. So a few years ago, I read a book about the purpose economy. The purpose economy. It's flipping the script just a little bit on, it's almost like a book on conscious capitalism. How do we make choices about what we're buying, when we're buying it, and how the workers were treated in that? It's that kind of thing. So a purposeful economy is leaning into what the kingdom of God is. It's a secular book, but I'm putting that on. So the bottom arrow is time moving forward, and from about 10,000 to 1760 CE, AD-CE, Common Era, Anno Domini, is the agricultural period. That is a long time. Now, I want you to be mindful of the quick clips here of the advances in technology and the advances of politics since 1760. And the United States is part of it. There's the industrial period, 1760 to 1940. This is what John Wesley was talking about. 1760, John Wesley's 55, 57 years old at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and he's talking about how we treat children, how we treat workers, how we understand that a day off is necessary, advocating for the Sabbath, etc. Now, in 1760, there is a shift, not in the United States yet, but there's a shift on this understanding of slavery. And in this shift of understanding of slavery, how do we understand humans as whole people, not just 3/5 of a person, not just as slaves, but how do we think about how humans work together? And this goes till about 1940, this Industrial Revolution. And then it's the Informational Revolution, 1940 to 2010. 1940 to 2010, when we've got I could probably have a hand raise in here for people that worked on computers early on in their careers, right? Walking into those big rooms, right? Those supercomputers, and now we put our computers in our pockets. All the things, all those processes that we used to do with cards and such, we can just slip into our pockets. And then from here on is, I think, the purpose economy. How do we understand ourselves given where we've been and where we're going? The information is at our fingertips. I left my computer in my office. But those of you who have a phone, you can Google anything I'm saying right now. As a matter of fact, you can press Google Translate and it will run a search on everything I'm saying now. Probably your phone is going to give you a brownie recipe later because I said brownie out loud. Right? This is part of it. So what do we make of all this? What do we make of now that we have encyclopedias, volumes of encyclopedias in our pocket? So what does this mean from an intellectual standpoint? I believe that we've lost the sense of wonder. When I sit down to dinner with my kids, and a question comes up. How many miles across is the Grand Canyon? Who was the number one song when Megan and I got married? Or who sang the number one song when Megan and I got married? What was that pastor who used to serve First Roswell? We could do, all of those questions can be answered in mere seconds instead of, you know what? How far is that? And can you imagine indigenous people, how they thought how far it was away, the Grand Canyon, when they thought, they didn't have computers. Boy, I wonder what they thought about that. Wonder what they thought about the different, you see, you could Google it and you get an answer and the conversation ends. Who was that number one? Well, I don't remember number one, but there was this wonderful band called Cake. And Megan and I loved Cake because we love cake. And so we bought the album Cake. We had no idea what kind of music it was, but we had a CD and the band's name was Cake, and we wore that CD out because we love cake and love cake. Right? Or that pastor at First Roswell. Well, no, I don't remember the pastor at First Roswell, but I did know a young man at First Roswell that I went to camp with, and he preached this wonderful sermon. I wonder, he was not older than I was. And so all of a sudden, the details of what we can look up go away, and our sense of wonder, our sense of story, our sense of narrative. I think moving from the industrial to informational age, the purpose economy is now about how we deepen our listening to our neighbor and better engaging with our neighbor. That is, we have all of what we have up here on our phone. What our phone can't do for us, our encyclopedia in our back pocket, what that can't do for us is move into the heart space. The purpose economy is about more deeply engaging in those around us. Deeply engaging, pausing to listen, not fast forwarding a story or hurrying by. Not keeping our conversations on the surface level, but instead deepening that impact. I am more convinced today that the purpose economy is going to be dependent on us as disciples of Jesus Christ, especially after COVID, especially during this divisive election season. The commercials are crazy, friends, on both sides. Oh, it's wild. It's wild. All kinds of stuff is getting blamed and slung, and it's only June. Like, we're not even to October yet, right? Oh my gosh. So great. My brother and I vote differently. We see the world differently. He's an introvert. I'm not. I don't know. He's tall. I'm not. All those things. Okay. So we talk about this, and now we're actively in conversation about, because we're seeing the commercials on both sides, we're actively in conversation, covenanting with one another that we're going to support one another. No matter who we vote for, our votes may cancel each other out. But my commitment is to you, Trent, and Trent, you to me. I'm starting small, right? But I'm sucked into it too, friends. I'm sucked into it too. Connecting with our neighbors, connecting with those closest to us, gives us an invitation to show up better and more holistically. So let's talk about how we rise to this purpose economy, how we move from head to heart. Maslow's millennial effect. In the purpose economy, we've got to see that what we're doing holistically for our neighbors is absolutely evident. We've got to care for people who are at the margins. Clothing, shelter, food, that is it. How do we then break the cycle where this dependency on this lower level isn't just the people that follow us's problem? Well, the poor will be with us always. Jesus said it, right? Must be true. I think there was a question mark in there that the translators missed along the way. I can't be certain, but I'll be watching the internet for another fragment, friends. Don't take it from me. The poor will always be with us? That's a different rhetorical model. That's an invitation to actually stop the generational transmission and pattern of poverty. How do we become part of that wrench in the system that breaks apart that pattern of generational poverty? Second, we have to understand the rise and dependence on technology. We're not stopping the train. We're not. So how do we understand that there's a rise of technology and just give ourselves a break? I don't know about you all, but there are some things technologically that I don't understand. I don't understand, and some young people in here might, I don't understand Discord. Anybody understand Discord? Young people, you understand Discord? So. Discord is like having, I'm going to try to translate it, I'm Generation X, everybody. So it's like having multiple chat rooms going on at the same time. So Alex, my oldest child, I walked into their room a few years ago. I said, "What are you doing?" Sitting there on the computer. "What are you doing?" "I'm on Discord." "Okay, was that a game?" "No." Alex was maintaining 26 different conversations at one time in 3 different themes. What? I stopped down on a pretty hat on Facebook, right? "Ooh, that's a pretty hat. Ooh, yellow. That's really obnoxious. I could really be seen well in my neighborhood. I love that pretty hat." And Alex is talking about digital gaming design, talking about an anatomy class, and then the third thing he was talking about was politics. Whoa. What's going on? Did you not like my pretty hat I found? But there are 26 conversations going on. Okay, if that's the case, then at dinner that night, when we all gathered around at dinner and we do our check-in, I'm not bemoaning the fact that I don't understand Discord. I'm interested in leaning in about what I can learn from Alex's generation. We're not stopping the train. We're not stopping the dependence on technology. I want to know. I want to know that potentially the doctor who will be caring for me in the next 25 or 30 years will have been on Discord, learning from people all over the world about a new technique that may just save my life. Instead of me saying, oh, that's not what not what I need. That's moving from head to heart. Bemoaning the fact that I don't understand Discord is up here. Leaning in for deeper listening is in the heart. We're also finding in the rise of the purpose economy that there's an outsourcing of quote unquote traditional family functions. Increase of daycare. The state of New Mexico gloriously has free pre-K across the board. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is huge, huge. For those of you who are more traditionalist or conservative, this is huge for our money economy in the coming years. To have a more literate and well-versed employee base here in New Mexico in the years to come. It's huge. Also, it's an invitation for us to consider how we're paying, how we're engaging, how we're knowing and recognizing that these traditional family forms of childcare can actually be a benefit to us. We can pay living wages to our beloved in the YMCA here, which we do, by the way. We can pay a living teacher wage to our faculty at Pathways Academy, which we do. Right? And we understand that in this learning environment of the church, 5 days a week, 6:30 in the morning to 6 at night, every day for the YMCA, 9 to 3:30, Monday through Thursday for Pathways. Used to be in the industrial age, you had a parent, it would be female parent, stay with the child to train that child through, go to a small schoolhouse, etc. Now we've outsourced that and found that there are more people that are taking on more family functions. The rise of restaurants, right? Think about that. Think about the rise of restaurants over the last several decade, 2 decades. There's far more choice out there. In my neighborhood, there is a new Vietnamese and Mexican fusion restaurant. Like, whoa, okay, I need to go there. I probably need to be prepared gastrointestinally, but I'm going to go. So restaurants. Megan grew up in a family household that going to a restaurant was on birthdays and anniversaries. So there was a home-cooked meal for breakfast and for dinner, and lunches were packed. When I was in youth ministry, I talked a lot about fast food. We actually did, when I was at First United Methodist Church of Denton with my youth program, we did a fast food fast during Lent. And the money that families would save, the youth group agreed that we would save some money and give it to a local organization, and we'd pool it together and have this rah-rah moment. I created little stickers. It was a young woman running away. It was an animated young woman running away from McDonald's and Burger King and Taco Bell. It was kind of fun, right? But you wouldn't believe, or maybe you would, the families that at first said, "You're crazy, this is not going to work," and at Easter time they said, "Thank you so much. We cook together now, we talk about our days, my kid's just not in the back seat just shouting out an order to me," that we're doing things differently. The rhythm of our lives is different. Now, it might have just been for 40 days. They might have just kicked back into the fast food dependency, but at least for those 40 days, there's something. Okay. Privatization. Here's another aspect in the purpose economy that we need to know, that there's a lot of angling for privatization. In the state of Texas, there's a lot of this going on in public education. Why don't we just privatize it? Just privatize education to be a far better situation, some say. Well, if we privatize everything, then we're narrowing our understanding of what the fullness of the economy can be. You know, in stewardship campaigns, I was surprised by this, moving from an associate pastor to a senior pastor, how many people don't like stewardship campaigns. Oh, man. You talk about money too much. For 4 weeks? 48 weeks, I'm just making sure you're coming back next week. Like, I don't, for 4 weeks I'm talking about, it's like I'm given permission to talk about money for those 4 weeks, but you're really encroaching on my life. I saw you in a hospital gown when you were in the hospital. Like, I was with you when you had a blood transfusion. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Like, money should be the simplest thing we talk about. And you love this place. As a matter of fact, you love this place so much that you complained that I painted my office. That it shouldn't have never gone away from cream. That's how much you love this place. I don't know. I'm sorry, Ricky, you're having to witness all of this. And Ricky's sitting back there thinking, he has not changed. I've known him for my entire life, and this is no different. This is the same thing. So, privatization. When we can no longer talk about money openly and honestly, then we are giving money a higher value system than we are God, than we are community. Don't talk about tithe with me. You shouldn't know how much I'm giving to the church. You shouldn't know how much I make. You shouldn't know. No, maybe according to you, maybe you're right. I don't really want to know. I want to know how you're investing your whole self into this community. That's what I'm really interested in. I want to hear from this breaks the system. This breaks the system of this privatization. This has us talking about things very differently. If our value system is God of abundance and love, then the value system of money is scarcity. I don't have enough. I need to make some. I need to earn some, right? It's all this transactional stuff. But what we're talking about at Central United Methodist Church is bucking the system of privatization. It's really inviting us to consider what it looks like for us to live together in community and what we're investing in together. The last is the rise of the purpose economy. We're going to have to start to be open and honest about environmental, political, and economic crises in our community and around the world. We cannot solve everything with our heads alone. We have to have some sense of solidarity with those around us. Okay, so how do we get through, how do we do this? How do we do this? How do we use the fullness of what we've been given in the United Methodist Church, prioritizing clergy as a class of folks that need to be well educated? How do we get through this? What are some ways that we can live into the purpose economy? We have to harness ambition. What I mean by that is whatever we get excited about, let's celebrate what we get excited about and test it. Let's test it. Let's take a risk on some things. Let's find out if this is where God's really calling us. I might really have a great idea, but it may not be where God's calling us. If we harnessed ambition, we can say, ooh, that's a good idea. Instead of holding on to that idea for ourselves and not sharing it, thinking, I don't think anybody's going to hear me well. I'm not going to share my idea. Or, I'm too new at the church. Or, I already had some ideas that failed. If we harness ambition, we're able to say, oh, that's a good idea. Let's get more people involved. Let's discern where we go from here. Let's see if this isn't just a head idea, but can we move into heart space? We have to understand, too, that social capital is what's going to drive us. Social capital is going to drive us into wherever God's leading us. What do we bring together in our relationships? Are we keeping Central United Methodist Church the best secret in Albuquerque? The best kept secret in Albuquerque? Or are we telling our networks, are we telling our neighbors and friends when they interact with us, hey, you seem really excited about life. Where do I get some of that? Oh my gosh, yeah. My church is awesome. Have you been there? It's crazy good. We had someone borrow our copper and didn't return it. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's crazy. We all showed up and said, they must have needed the copper more than we did. Thank gosh we have insurance. Hold lightly to it. Social capital. I'm not there for the air conditioning. I'm there for my people. Air conditioning is a nice bonus. Let's be clear. I'm there for the people. That's our social capital. Finding ways to challenge the status quo. We can be a traditional place. We do not have to live into traditionalism. As I said a couple of weeks ago, traditionalism is just another ism, like sexism, racism. Only fitting into this box. Let's break down that status quo. Here's how Central has already started us in breaking down the status quo. Did you know that our Central United Methodist Church Foundation was founded in 1965? Okay, 1965. Total social upheaval. Okay, just put yourself there. 1965, total social upheaval. Total transformative, things are upside down. People are burning bras and draft cards. There's all kinds of stuff going on. There are riots. There's this thing called the Civil Rights Movement. Oh my gosh. And what did this church do? You know what? In response to all this chaos, let's start a foundation. I did some research. In our jurisdiction, 9 states, there is one other church that has that founded a foundation in 1969. One other church in our jurisdiction. It's in Houston. It disaffiliated. Okay. Now, that was bucking the system. How do I, as a pastor, after doing a little bit of research, there's something in the system about breaking the status quo. I love you even more. What are the ways that I can help us break the status quo, right? What are the ways that we can grow and change here and agitate a little bit? Gosh, I love this. Okay, appreciate impermanence. Appreciate impermanence. Nothing is forever. Nothing's forever. Hold lightly to the outcomes. Seek out barriers. Why seek out barriers? Because where the barriers are gives us an invitation to more deeply trust our faith so that we can move forward. What if we took on the Reformed Jewish phrase, tikkun olam, to repair the world? What if we set our hearts and minds to that? What if we decided to repair the world together? And friends, it starts within us as individuals. What are the parts of your lives that you need to forgive yourself? We're far more loving with those around us than we are with ourselves. Maybe that's just for me. Maybe I need to hear that today. But there's some work we've got to do in our hearts in order to repair the world. Maybe we need to repair our inner world first. The last thing is think big. Think big. When we think big, when we think, oh, we'll never get that done. Oh, we'll never see that through. Then we can move more faithfully into the heart space. Well, what if we could do that? What would it take? Well, what if we should do that? What would it take? This gives us an invitation to see and sense how we can turn the light back on in the church. This is for all of those Vincent van Goghs out there in our community who have seen the church as exclusivistic or bounded or conditional. If we're able to turn on the light of the church and say, y'all come, test us, because we're ready. We're repairing the world. We're thinking big. We're pressing up against those spaces and places that not everybody else is pressing into. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's 10:45. I have 4 minutes. How about that? I'm not robing today because, hi Ed, you have a question. Do I have any comments on annual conference and tell us about Kelly Brooks? Comments on annual conference. So, annual conference, we are in a loose agreement with Sacramento Methodist Assembly. Sacramento Methodist Assembly disaffiliated, and so we're navigating that relationship. Annual conference, it was a joy-filled celebration. Claudia, Sandy Garcia were our member delegates there. Dodie Hawkins, Peggy Arnsdorf, Sanford Kuhn was there, and Kathy Duncan were all there representing United Women in Faith. We have an understanding. Dodie presented a resolution on, what was the phrase?
Getting rid of non-functional turf.
Non-functional turf. Yeah, I used that phrase with my father-in-law, and he's like, there's no such thing as non-functional turf. All turf is okay. Chemical engineer. Yeah, so anyway, so that passed, and then, it was a really beautiful experience together. Bishop Schnese leads that so well. And tell us about Kelly Brooks. So Kelly is now will be appointed July 1st in extension ministry to Chrysalis Counseling. So she starts that July 1st as part of her extension ministry as an ordained deacon in the New Mexico Conference. Good. Other questions? Any anger issues? If you don't want to ask any questions out loud, there are pages on your tables. Just write that question in the box. I'll get to them next week. We have 2 more weeks together. Next week, I've been asked, I've been asked about what I do when I'm not in Albuquerque. And so I'm going to give a little presentation on lived experience as part of our understanding as United Methodist Christians. So part of what I do when I'm not in Albuquerque is I travel around the country and I do family systems workshops. And so I'm going to do a little family systems work with us because we all have experiences, conditions by which we are living out our lives. So I'll do a little family systems workshop. It should be fun. And then the last week is we're going to do something really fun, and it's going to be called the World Cafe. And the World Cafe is we're going to take some ideas from all that we heard, and the question on that last Sunday in June 30th, is where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? So we're going to take what we learned and start having that conversation. It should be a joy. I can't thank you all enough for staying with me today. I think TLC should have come and fixed our thermostat, but they didn't. So thanks for being in the icebox today. You're welcome. You burned a bunch of calories, so you're welcome. Now let's go to the other part of the church where we take our coldness and coolness with us and celebrate there. God bless you all. We'll see you in church in just a few minutes.